Welcome to Shut Up and Sit. I'm Yedda Stansel, a consciousness coach and consultant. I'm on a mission to bring mindfulness to the modern world. Each week, we will offer ancient healing practices, real-world examples, and the latest research in neurobiology and behavior change into fun conversation that invites you to wake up your highest self. Now, let's go shut up and sit. All right, welcome back to this show, everybody. Yedda here as always. I am alive. I'm on fire today with some really cool stuff to talk to you about. Most importantly, though, and again, I know some of you listen, some of you watch on YouTube, but if you can't see, the reason why I'm alive and on fire with some really cool stuff, we are talking about the 3 steps to inner freedom today. Autonomy is one of my core needs. I love to talk about freedom. Freedom drives everything I do. But if you can't see me today, you should know that I am wearing a bright ass yellow Triumph motorcycle t-shirt. And you might be going, and what does that have to do with freedom? So if you have a copy of my book, if you don't, you can go to shutupandsit.com and you can get one. But what I love about this and in my book, and again, if you're on video, you're going to see this, but if you have a copy of my book, there's this really cool picture in the front of my book, and it's a picture of my mom and my dad and me when I'm a baby. And my dad's wearing this killer Triumph motorcycle shirt, bright ass yellow. And there is this part of my dad, of course, obviously in me, my DNA. And when I started doing this work and I started kind of digging into like inner freedom, asking the bigger questions, who am I? We just wrapped up the episode about the 5 stages of ego recovery. Our ego's here. It's going to be here forever. My dad had an incredible ego. He had this persona, this dynamic energy that they would say that it felt like when Elvis was in the building, he just had a presence that would just fill and consume the room. And I believe that we all have that presence. And I believe when we right size our ego and we do this work to wake up our truth and who we really are, and we uncover these limiting beliefs, these stories, the shit that somebody gave us, the wounds that happened to us, we can break free from all of that. And I love that I really learned how to call on my dad's kind of autonomy, freedom, energy. And he loved to ride motorcycles. When he was his most alive, actually, was when he was on a motorcycle. And when I was little, he would come pick me up for weekends. I was already, with my mom and my stepdad at this point. He would come get me on weekends. And he literally would show up on his motorcycle. He'd just come tearing down the street, pick me up, put me on the back of his motorcycle, no helmet, had long hair, a little girl just holding on for dear life. And some of the most freeing moments of my life were on the back of that motorcycle, on the back of that Triumph motorcycle. And so when I started doing this work, I actually Googled, I was like, I wonder if you can still get that kind of vintage t-shirt, the Triumph motorcycle t-shirt. So you can get it. I am wearing it. And something about today when I woke up, I thought, I'm talking about inner freedom on the show today. I really wanted to embody inner freedom. I not only wanted to talk about it, I literally wanted to be in the energy of it. And being in that energy and wearing one of the shirts that my dad had, and just kind of that badass kind of autonomy rebel energy, if you will, is a part of who I am. And I love that doing this work, I didn't have to let go of who I really am in order to figure out who I really am. It sounds like a little bit of a strange paradox, but the truth is you don't have to stop being you. If anything, when we get into inner freedom, I think most of us have forgotten who we really are, and we're just wearing stories and wounds and taking on shadows from people who hurt us or who we may have hurt them, or vice versa, or maybe it's the law of reciprocity, we hurt each other, and we're just walking around carrying all this darkness and this heaviness, and we've forgotten that the freedom is inside of each and every one of us, because our belief systems do contribute to our inner freedom. So I put this shirt on today. I really felt really excited about it because I just felt a little bit closer to my dad. And actually there's this really cool bike shop, well, not anymore, but used to be when I was a kid, in town here in Richmond in Virginia. And my dad, when he would pick me up on that bike and then, just hold on for dear life, this little girl kind of squealing as he would just tear off down the highway, he would take me to the bike shop. And I would spend my weekends, and my mom kind of sort of knows this, but she doesn't know all the details of it. Eventually, the weekends ended up shifting and changing because I think my parents probably thought that I was going into some pretty dangerous places, which the truth was I was. we would go on the motorcycle to Taco Bell, eat some crispy tacos because Taco Bell had just opened up. And then he would take me to the garage. And then it was a really seedy part of town. It still is kind of. And he would take me to this bike shop and we would hang out in the garage in the back. And so he'd work on motorcycles all weekend, drinking beer, smoking cigarettes, listening to Leonard Skinner, Boston. I mean, rock and roll music going on. I mean, I was surrounded by bikers, in second grade, this little girl. Not only was I surrounded by bikers, I was surrounded by probably, and moms, the parents and listening to the show are going to probably gasp when they hear this. There were some really naked, scantily clad women in a lot of really questionable outfits. You could call them bikinis, but probably they weren't, all around the garage. And I remember that just being the norm. There was just naked women, there were beer cans, there was party music. It was always crowds of people tinkering on stuff. I would bounce little bouncy balls and, there'd be all these sharp objects. And that's just the way it was. And so what I love about that and the purpose of sharing that story with you and connecting that with inner freedom was, freedom for me and that development of inner freedom. Some people would say, Yedda, that sounds really dangerous and that doesn't sound like freedom to me. But what I love about where I grew up and how I grew up is inner freedom it is in our inner mind. You guys are learning that by now. But I love that I can talk to anybody, anywhere, and anytime or any place. And so a little bit of this chameleon personality was developed for me to go from that world on the weekend to showing back up on Sunday night. My stepfather being a Vietnam veteran, my mom, their siblings, I've got to go to school. And so I learned how to quickly pivot and adapt between worlds. And so that's my human story. But I bring that up because it's what makes me able to do the work that I do. And I work with clients all over the world, CEOs of Fortune 10 companies, down to literally people who would probably be outcast in society and totally forgotten. Because those people don't scare me. If anything, I know those people. I was raised with lots of different experiences and lots of different senses of community. So I don't have one sense of community that I feel like I belong to. I feel like I really got the gift of being able to walk into any world and be able to feel like I had a sense of knowing these people, knowing their voice, knowing their beliefs, knowing their languages. And so I wanted to put the shirt on today because to me, inner freedom is really, really some cool stuff. And I feel like I wake up every day in a place of inner freedom because I'm awake, aware, and available to know that I have choices. And the truth is you have choices too. Every single day, every single moment, you have choices. And I was on a call last night actually with one of my group coaching calls. We had several ladies on there. And one woman said, this work is amazing. I didn't realize, I had no idea that the I'm not enough belief that I've been really struggling with was just a story that my mom gave to me. And the truth is probably somebody gave that to her mom. And she said, I'm breaking generational chains of bondage of thinking that I couldn't or I can't or I'm not enough that liberates me, but also liberates my daughter and all the other people I interact with. And that's really what inner freedom is all about, the power to say, wait a minute, I actually have a choice to do something different here. And so today on the show, talking about these 3 steps of inner freedom, we are wrapping up chapter 4, which I absolutely have told you is one of my favorite parts of the book. We've been kind of deep in the well. We're going to start to kind of climb out a little bit. We're moving into chapter 5, but not quite yet. So I want to talk to you about what are the 3 steps to inner freedom. Then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about another form of mindfulness, one of my favorites, primordial sound meditation, which is a really great way to expand your inner freedom. And we'll wrap up with a little reading with the end of chapter 4. And again, this is all just meant to tie it all together to help you understand once you've done the 5 stages of ego recovery, you're moving through that. Your ego now gets to help you and work with you. If you remember from the last show, it helps you. It does all these cool things to bring freedom more into the forefront. My ego, that rebel energy, that triumph. I think it's so funny that, my dad never liked Harley Davidsons. He thought they leaked oil and they weren't cool bikes. And, back in the 70s and 80s, he was like anti-Harley. So triumphs were always his thing. But I love it because not only did he like the bike triumph, but I love the word triumph and this triumphing over things. And that was really what my dad struggled with the most. He just had this magnetic personality and presence and just awesome raw talent. And nobody really knew what to do with him. And he didn't know what to do with him. And I feel really lucky to carry on and to break some of those bondage and those generational chains of addiction, because that's what he did. He actually sought out and addicted and numbed a lot of his discomfort of not knowing how to bring that ability of his into the world in a way that could help him. And he just got lost in trying to play it small, to shut up, to sit down, to disappear. And when I remember his essence and energy, it must have taken a lot of drugs and alcohol to make that part of himself just disappear, because it was so incredibly magnificent. So I'm wearing yellow. I'm shouting the word triumph today for many reasons. And triumph is also another word for inner freedom. So let's talk about these 3 steps for inner freedom. The first is, and it's really a mindfulness practice, is flow with whatever comes. And this really means, and again, I was talking to another client about the difference between taking a boat, and I gave her this analogy. I said, would you take a boat and a group of people where the rapids are coming down, right, the river, and would you tell us to get in the water and turn the boat towards the rapids and paddle as hard as we could to paddle upstream? And she goes, no, nobody does that. You get in and you ride the rapids downstream. And I said, exactly. So when you're trying to work hard and constantly do things to make yourself better, and you're in these old beliefs and narratives, and it's just so hard, there's so much work in personal development, it's no different than putting a boat in a river and asking a group of people to help you paddle upstream. Or worse, paddle upstream yourself. It's impossible. So one of the tools of mindfulness, and when we learn to shut up and sit down and go with them, it's not the law of do more to get more. It's actually called the law of least effort. Where can I turn my boat, get in the river of life, and literally go with the flow? And you know what that's like if you've ever been on the rapids, or if you've ever seen the movie about the rapids. The river is telling you where you are going. You're not telling the river where you're going. So you work with the flow of the rapids and the water and the current. That's the way this work works when you get into the river of life. And when we wake up with mindfulness and we get our boat and we start to step into the river, it's called surrender. It's called letting go. Inner freedom comes from going with the flow. And I've alluded to this a little bit on some of our previous episodes, but when I talk about going with the flow, with whatever comes up, there's an intelligence to all of the existence of universe. And when you think about that intelligence, and I don't care what your belief is of how it all started, there is an existence and there is an intelligence that has all the bazillions of things happen. We don't control when flowers bloom and what molecules on the desert of the African Sahara get picked up and dropped into this and become the silt in the ocean over off the coast of South America. It's amazing what is happening in the world as we speak to make all of life work together in this beautiful, harmonious orchestra. That same divine intelligence that's operating everything is also available to us. And that's what I mean by going with the flow. Could you just imagine, and we played a game on another episode where I said, could you imagine a day where you just surrendered? And inner freedom does come from putting your boat in and going downstream. Go with the flow. And when things come up and you've built an expectation or a story of how it's supposed to go, you've gotten out ahead of yourself in the future. Or if you're fearful that the same thing that happened 10 years ago is going to happen again, you're living in the past. So mindfulness says, if you want to get really into inner freedom, step into the present moment, put your boat in the water, and actually flow with whatever comes. And so that doesn't mean we don't care, we give up. We work with the flow of life as opposed to against it. And so this is one that I love. And when I think about existence, I was actually, again, I have a whole kind of just platform that I share a lot on not only our online course, but also in social media. And I put a post up the other day, and I was thinking about this one for this episode. Did you know, we talk about the intelligence of the universe, okay? In the Milky Way, which is one galaxy, and there are, by the way, trillions of galaxies that make up the universe, okay? But in our one galaxy, the Milky Way, did you know if you tried to cross the Milky Way at the speed of light, it would take you over 100,000 years? And we need to think about that for a second. 100,000 years if you got in the Voyager and you tried to cross the Milky Way. That's one galaxy, and there are trillions in the universe. I just want you to hold that for just a second. That's pretty fucking big. That's like you can't even comprehend how big the universe is. And we get so stuck in our finite minds and we think we control the whole damn thing. We've got zero control. And so we've got this illusion that our ego thinks I'm at the center of the universe. The truth is you are. We all are at the center of the universe because we all are the universe. But the truth is our ego thinks, no, my sense of me, Yedda, in this body, in this moment, I am the CEO of the universe. And so I was telling a client last night, I'm like, girl, you need to write a resignation letter and you need to submit your resignation as CEO of the universe because it is not your job. It isn't even a job you're qualified to do, not from the ego's perspective alone. And so when we go with the flow of life and we just take what comes, we're trusting that there's a larger, a greater force working for the greater good. And I think if we could cultivate a skill and a capacity to hold a belief that we're all part of that greater good, and if we just learn to work with each other instead of against each other, we could easily flow with whatever comes. Because that's really what the whole point is just let your boat float downstream. I'd rather be on a party barge with people I love to hang out with, cruising and letting the rapids take me and going with the flow, than struggling my ass off in a canoe by myself trying to paddle upstream to get somewhere. And that's what our personal development industry has turned into. Hard work, lots of money, lots of time, and we buy the belief that we're broken and it's going to take forever to get there. And the rest of us, this little teeny little part of us, especially those of us doing this work, are like, we're just cruising by on the party boat and we're watching all these people paddle upstream and we're like, have fun with that. Because if you let go and go with what is working and what is already inside of you, it makes life easier. So that's the first one, flow with whatever comes. Second one, use what comes to your advantage. Everything is brought to us in exactly the right time, in exactly the right way and place, just as it's supposed to when we learn mindfully to just shut up and go with the flow. So I go back to my river analogy. If you're going down the river and you come along and you come around this bend and you're on this party barge and everybody's having a good time, everybody's healthy and happy, and all of a sudden there's this big tree that's fallen across the river, the goal isn't to get out and to remove the tree. You might find another way around the tree. Maybe the tree is there to tell you this whole part of the river's closed off because just ahead, you can't see it, is a massive dam. And if you go off the cliff, it's not going to be good. So again, I go back to following the flow in mindfulness. That shutting up and sitting says sometimes we do hit obstacles. Sometimes things that come across our path, they're not always there to hurt us. They might actually be there to help us. And this is where I kind of bring the suffering piece back in. Suffering has a purpose. It serves a purpose. It shows us contrast. It helps us create different ways of thinking. It helps us to come up with new problem-solving skills. Suffering is this rub, and I use it like this. My meditation teacher, Gina, kind of shows, the rub of the hand. And she's like, the suffering is the rub, and nobody wants to sit with the rub and the suffering. They want to avoid it, run from it, shame it, name it, blame it, do whatever they can. But the truth is, when we can learn to sit with a little bit of discomfort, we can learn all types of things about ourselves and other people. And I'm not talking about the resilience of nothing's going to break me. Sometimes we need to completely break to rebuild anew, and that's okay too. But when we're in this place of using what comes to our advantage, one of the coolest things about mindfulness is we cultivate curiosity and we cultivate awe. Two of my favorite words. And three. My third one would be wonder, because I'm always like, I wonder what if. I'm really curious about how. So curiosity, wonder, all come from this unknown, this magnificent kind of unlimited possibilities when we shut up and sit and go down inside of ourselves. But we start to learn that we're not CEOs of the universe. We cannot manipulate and control and coerce everything from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep every day. Now, you might be saying, that's not true, Yedda. I can. I've done it. I tried to do it too, and I was pretty good at it on a lot of days. But the cost that it took my nervous system, my psychological system, my spiritual system, my financial system, my social system, all of the systems in my life eventually took a toll. Because that's what burnout is. We hit the wall and we completely crash or we burn out because we're working so hard to control for every single variable. I have family members like that. I have friends like that. I've lived that life. And so this ability to just say, I'm just letting go of that. I don't know when I wake up where I'm going to go for every single moment of the entire day. Do I have a schedule? Do I have an intention? Absolutely. But do things come up? Of course. So when we cultivate mindfulness, the inner freedom isn't something you get from mindfulness. It's rather a skill that you cultivate to just go with the flow. So if I wake up and I'm going to go take a 7:30 workout class and I accidentally oversleep, well, then I'm going to have to pivot. Maybe I go at 4:30 today. If I make the 7:30 class and then I've got the calls set up and I've got the next things, if I stay in this moment and go with the flow and things, and I'm able to be with what is, then I'm not so rigid when somebody cancels or reschedules or reconnects or shows up at the wrong time. You just go with what is. And here's the cool part about point number 2, using what comes to your advantage. What happens is with curiosity, you can say, well, what can I do with this now that this is here? Maybe, and I'm curious if you could ask yourself a question, how many times in life has life brought you something to your advantage? You can call it a gift, you can call it magic, you can call it, shock and awe. How many times has life just brought something to you that you were totally not expecting that actually worked out to your advantage? Think about that. Maybe you got introduced to somebody that, helped the next step in your career. Maybe you had a chance encounter or meeting with, or just think about all the things that life is bringing you. And if you could be in a space where you could shut up and sit and cultivate some silence and some presence and expand that window of awareness, you might actually see those things. They're happening to all of us. It's just, are we awake and seeing them, or are we asleep and we're actually head down and we're missing them? And it kind of reminds me of a really cool movie I saw a long time ago that I love, and it's called Sliding Doors, I think was the name of it. And it was a really cool movie. I think Gwyneth Paltrow was in it, and back in the kind of heyday of her early career. And the whole movie was about if she caught the subway or if she missed the subway, and how the two trajectories of her life went if she made that train and if she missed the train. Just that one choice of going with catching the train and then being held up and not catching the train. And I love movies like that and stories like that, because things happen to us for our advantage if we work with the flow of life, not against it. Which leads me into number 3, and it's really, you want to talk about the power of inner freedom. And number 3 says, learn to be completely self-sufficient. And I'm going to actually switch self-sufficient into what a word I call self-referral. When I mean be completely self-sufficient, and I have in the book next to it, it says in quotations, create your own earthquake. What I mean by that, because clients will ask me, what does it mean to create my own earthquake? Self-sufficiency, being able to take care of yourself, meet your own needs without relying on anybody else. And I'm not saying you become a recluse and a hermit and you don't need anybody, but you stop putting the burden on other people, places, and things to meet your core inner needs. Nobody is here to meet your needs but you. And I know this because sometimes clients will say, what about my parents? They didn't meet my needs when I was growing up, and I'm struggling today because of it. Great. Then parent yourself and start to meet your needs now for that small wounded self that still lives inside of you. Because you've been going around and moving from relationship to relationship, from job to job, expecting somebody else to meet a need for you that you're responsible for meeting. Because guess what? You're a grown up now. You have the ability to go out there and make massive things happen in the world. Get out of the story of the victimization. Build the belief that I can show up. I can make a difference. I am making a difference. Because when you can be completely self-sufficient, what happens is you're able to show up in the world and you're able to meet your needs, and you don't put that expectation on anybody. That's inner freedom. I don't expect anyone to pay my bills. I don't expect anybody to come in and do the things that need to be done to take care of me. And that doesn't mean I don't count on and rely on people. And I'm not saying you guys aren't supposed to take care of other people. What I'm saying to you here is be in a place where you take control of your emotional needs and you stop expecting other people to do things for you, that it's now time for you to invite your ego to step into to help you to upgrade and become the mature whole person that you've always been deep down inside. And so I'm in that space. It sounds a little bit like I might be a little intense, but remember, I'm wearing my Triumph shirt today. And I gotta tell you, my dad actually many times got bet to crash his motorcycle into a brick wall to see if he'd survive, and he did it. I'm not that person. I don't go that far. But that need and that intensity that comes out of that kind of rebel autonomy that I got from my dad is really, it's important because, and this is what I have written here at the bottom of the 3 steps to inner freedom. It says, once you do these 3, flow with whatever comes, use what comes to your advantage, learn to be completely self-sufficient, aka create your own earthquake. Then your mental process feeds itself explosive inspiration without the need for outside stimulus. So drinking, alcohols, trips, relationships. When you are able to say, I don't need any outside stimulus to take the explosive power of who I am as a human being to come up out into the world, that's inner freedom. And so this is ultimately where we're going with this work. And why are we trying to cultivate inner freedom? And why do those 3 things matter? Because what I want you to do is I want you to get to a place where you can arrive. A lot of people say arrive at yes, and I'm going to actually add a little something here. I want you to arrive at your own hell yes. Hell yes. That is me. That has my name written all over it. That is where I want to go in the world. Because we learn with our beliefs where we say hell yes, and we also learn where we say, no, not yet, not really for me, or no, thank you. And what happens when we operate from belief systems that actually benefit us, what we learn is we learn how to manage, well, do I want to say yes to this or do I want to say no to this? Because the truth is you do have to love your limits. You do have to know. And Jen Rice is a lady I've been doing some work with in Egypt and kind of doing some global stuff. And it's really cool. And I love her language. And I got that from her. And she was like, what's your hell yes? And this kind of inner compass work that she does helped me really dig in and say, not only when was the last time I said yes, but when was the last time I said hell yes? Hell yes to Yedda. Hell yes to let's head towards that brick wall. Hell yes in a way that I could go out in the world and create as long as it benefits the greater good. And I could bring the truth of who I was in the world, but I come from and I create from a place of inner freedom. And then it allows me to say, I'm actually going to say no to that because it doesn't take me into a place of inner freedom. And now in my relationships, personally, professionally, that's an inner gauge that I operate from. If I say yes to this and I say no to that, am I operating from a place of inner freedom? Because that's a real core need for me. And then the whole game changes because my presence and who I am fills and really just like my Father's energy expands out into the room I'm in, but I'm doing it with the sense to just let my freedom expand out and empower other people to freedom versus walking in a room and unconsciously expecting you and everyone else to meet a need for me that I'm either not aware of or unwilling or unable to meet for myself. That's what this work is all about, is getting people into a place, and I call it communication and communion with one another. And it says here in the book, it says, when we can come into communion with one another, whether it's through friendship, family dynamics, personal relationships, professional collaboration, romantic partnerships, whatever it is, our essential human needs are being met. That's what allows each of us to arrive at an authentic, joyful hell yes. So you're working in not just communication. When I say communion, I mean, we're literally exchanging energy with our belief systems where you're in relationship, but you're no longer expecting people to do for you what you think you can't do for yourself. That's why it's called a limiting belief. Could you imagine in an area that you've been stuck in your life? What if the only thing that's holding you back from achieving what it is that you want was you believing that you could meet those needs and do what's required to get you from where you are to where you need to be? It's all belief systems. So when you say, oh, I really wish that I could have that great job or that great life or that great relationship, you get what you believe. So we're wrapping up chapter 4 so you can really understand what inner freedom looks like. And here's the deal. If you've never, ever cultivated a belief system that inner freedom is available to you, that it's a possibility, that it's a reality you could live in, it's going to feel a little awkward. It's going to feel a little strange. So that's why we sit with it every day with repetition. That's why we sit with it in a theta brainwave. That's why we find the inner space inside of ourselves first to be with all of life, suffering, sadness, joy, elation, highs, lows, ups, down. And that kind of brings me to, as we begin to wrap up here, my mindfulness tool that I wanted to share with you. Primordial sound meditation, and I've talked about it some, but really sitting, and I'm talking about really sitting with the sounds in nature, which is what primordial sounds are, to really sit in not man-made sound, the sounds of nature, the sounds of the universe. When we sit in silent, still awareness in these primordial sounds, the sound of rain, the sound of wind, the sound of the ocean, the birds, we all know that's soothing. We love, and people, oh, well, one day I'm going to take a vacation. I'm going to go up to the coast of Bali and I'm just going to let it all go and put my feet in the sand. Well, you know what? You can do that anywhere, at any time, as long as you can be connected to nature. You might want to open a window. You might want to actually go out into nature if it's available to you. You could listen to the sounds of waves if you're in your office. But primordial sounds drop us deeper into freedom inside of ourselves, because there's a sound there that we're not equating to with logic or language. And so when you drop in, it's probably one of my favorite methods is primordial sound meditation. When you drop deeper into primordial sound meditation and you sit with the sounds of nature and you get out of the sound of the narrative of your ego and your head, you create space. I mean, how many people could sit and listen to the sound of birds chirping and be angry? Let's just think about that for a second. It's probably possible. But if I put you for 20 minutes out in a beautiful sunny day like it is, I'm looking up out at the street and the sun is shining and birds are singing and it's peaceful and it's calm, it creates peaceful calm inside of you if you can really sit with it. So I love primordial sound meditation, and it helps me a lot of times get really quiet. And I love that when I go into my primordial sound meditation, which is a mantra, it's really cool. The mantra that you get, and I use this with my clients, the date and time you're born, the latitude and longitude of where exactly you were born. In the Sanskrit and in the Eastern Vedantic teachings and philosophy, they assign you a primordial sound mantra meditation that was the exact sound the universe was making at the moment that you were born. And it's all based upon astrology, and it's all really cool, and there's really cool science behind it. But kind of tying in this, like the expansiveness of the universe and where the sun and the moon and the stars were at the exact moment I was born, and that frequency of the sound of the universe that you might not audibly hear with your ear, but that vibrational sound of the universe that was happening at the moment I was born is one of my favorite sounds to sit with as a mantra and hold in my mind, because I tap into that expansiveness of the universe. So if it takes 100,000 years to cross the Milky Way, and that's one of trillions of galaxies, I can't even comprehend how long it would take to, and I don't even know how many universes there could be. I mean, who knows how expansive all this is? What if it really is limitless? What if there is no end to it, to us, to me, to you? What if, we could really spend some cool time talking about this. So when I get into that space inside of myself and open up to the possibility of the expansiveness of parts of the universe working in and through me and you and everyone else in the world, it changes the whole compass and the whole dynamic of what we're really dealing with. And then I just bow my head and I go into a place of deep reverence and I just say thank you, because I don't even begin to know how it all works. So that's the kind of freedom and inner space and triumph, the ability to triumph over your humanness in a way that connects you to the bigger expansive cosmos that we're all connected to. But our ego's just kind of gotten so terrified and afraid of it. It's kind of put a shroud and a veil over it and tricked us to think we're living in this shadow and the illusion, which is a whole nother show. And today I wanted to remind you that there is the possibility for you to live in inner freedom and to expand. Nothing is wrong with you. There's nothing in there that's broken or needs to be fixed. It's just a waking up and a coming back home to the true expansiveness inside of you, inside of me, and inside of every single person that you see when you go out the rest of your day today and you just encounter. That freedom is in all of us. And I really believe that we're here to wake it up inside of ourselves and use that freedom to wake it up inside of other people. So I'm going to close this out with a little bit. Gosh, I'm so sad to see chapter 4 go. Robin sits behind the camera and he's probably like, God, yet I'm really glad to see chapter 4 go. We have been in the depths, in the bowels of belief system. So we're going to roll into chapter 5. It's not about willpower on our next episode. I have an incredible guest. Eric Brown is coming. Actually, no, Eric's not coming next. I take that back. We're going into It's Not About Willpower. Eric's in chapter 7, so we'll get into Eric later. So chapter 5 coming up about It's Not Willpower. We're going to really go into a lot more around mindfulness. We're going to really get into some real specifics about we can't white knuckle this. This work is not something we're supposed to white knuckle, so we'll talk about that some more. But I want to close you with just a brief reading, which is the very end of chapter 4. I feel like we've got to give a very sacred kind of like closure ceremony because we've spent so much time with belief. But it says, so many of us have spent our whole lives believing that something is wrong with us. In my own life, I remember thinking, there has got to be something wrong with me. Why can't I just be happy and normal and hang out with cool people? But it was because I was showing up to my life from this deeply rooted sense of exclusion and dysfunction, and nobody wants to be around me, that I believed that they thought something was wrong with me. But at some point, I started to wake up and think, well, let's find out what it's like to show up as a mature, kind, joyful, loving, compassionate, aware person. And that's exactly what I did. So hopefully you're arriving at a place of understanding that there's nothing wrong with you either. And I say in parentheses, do I need to repeat that? There's nothing wrong with you. It's as simple and profound as shutting up and sitting. It's also as difficult and uncomfortable as shutting up and sitting because you're excavating your lifelong patterns of belief, and you need to experience both, the difficulty and the simplicity, the magic and the discomfort. Otherwise, you're just sitting still. And honestly, some people could sit still every day for the next 40 years. Oh, sorry, Mom, and still be assholes. You probably know a few. And that is the truth. And this is where the last quote I close with here on this chapter says, the thing about belief trumping biology is that everybody arrives at their own truth in their own time. And if you're not there yet, you're certainly on the road to getting there. Just by taking the time to read this book, you've started to ask the right questions. I know something's not working. I know I want something to be different. I don't know what to do. And so mindfulness that we move into in chapter 5 actually teaches you how to be silent, how to sit in silence, still present focused awareness. And it's in that silent, still present focused awareness that you wake up to what you've been thinking. And from there, you know that that's how you change your life. And so that's the ending of chapter 4. And it's just such a wonderful opportunity to sit here and talk to you and just share with you about these 3 components of inner freedom, getting ready to take you into It's Not About Willpower and really understanding. Now that you know all this, we're going to start to help you kind of come back down the mountain and really begin to put this into practice and process of how am I rewriting, how am I showing up, and how am I actually manifesting this new belief, this new way of integrative development and learning out into the world. So I'm looking forward to hanging out with you on the next episode. And as always, make it an incredibly mindful day. Have a lot of fun with this. Hold it all loosely. Most importantly, when you put your boat in the stream, turn it downstream. Invite people to come in, hang out, have a party with you. Life is meant to be enjoyed. It's not meant to be suffering and hard and painful. Put your boat in, turn it downstream, and I'll see you on the next episode. Talk soon.
May you know goodness. May you know peace. May you know contentment. May you be